The original Dead Space was a surprise hit when it launched back in 2008, selling roughly over 3 million copies worldwide, as well as receiving some incredibly positive reception amongst critics and gamers alike. People praised it for taking and adopting elements from games like Resident Evil in terms of its gameplay, and its themes and atmosphere was heavily inspired by Ridley Scott's masterpiece film, Alien. Then in the year of 2010 at E3, a sequel to the game was unveiled and titled Dead Space 2. The game was to include brand new features such as more space combat, a more character-driven story, and a shit ton of action. Comparisons to the Dead Space games and the Alien films have been made very apparent over the years. Alien and Dead Space were sci-fi horror, whilst its sequels to each respective franchise, Aliens and Dead Space 2, had a lot more action-driven elements as opposed to its horror roots. I can't really decide of which of the films I like more out of Alien and Aliens, as they're both very different in terms of approach and genre, both excellent films in their own right. However, Dead Space 2, I believe, improves on essentially everything that its predecessor did. In fact, it was Dead Space 2 that got me into this franchise to begin with. I absolutely loved and adored the game, and it was one of the main games I played over and over again before I got Xbox Live later in the year. Now, I look back on some of these memories when recently playing through the entire game for like the 10th time. Has my opinion changed of it? I still absolutely adore the game. It still has some flaws and some aspects have aged, but it is still a magnificent sequel. Something that's actually really neat about the plot of this game is that a lot of it feels like it can stand on its own. The reason being is that everything is presented so well within its writing of the opening cutscene, it just gets newcomers up to speed. You also have the option to watch a recap of the first game if you wish, and it's available on the main menu. The story picks up 3 years after the events of the first game. The returning protagonist from the first game, Isaac Clarke, is shown to be having a video call with his recently deceased girlfriend Nicole, presumably not long before her death occurred in the first game. What's immediately different about this game compared to the original is that Isaac is no longer a silent protagonist and is voiced and mocapped by Gunnar Wright. While some people weren't too happy about this change, I do think it was absolutely necessary in terms of how the narrative plays out, particularly how in the first game some of the more emotional and shocking moments aren't really expressed all that well due to some of Isaac's body language and can just look a little bit awkward in my opinion. Giving the character a voice and showing his face all the more throughout the game gives the player more of an attachment to him as a character, and you can really empathise with him as the game shows he's tormented by the visions of Nicole and punishing himself for her death. Isaac is awoken from stasis by an operative of a woman named Dana. The operative is actually the protagonist from a comic called Dead Space Ignition. I really hope you didn't get too attached to him. Isaac witnesses the start of another necromorph outbreak and narrowly escapes with his life. Dana reveals to him that he was dragged onto the station orbiting Titan, one of Saturn's moons, known as the Sprawl, for research purposes by the Earth government, and had the entire outbreak from the last game covered up. She continues to contact him throughout the first few chapters of the game, saying that he has a dementia-like disease that'll kill him unless he reaches her in time, and claims that she has the cure. Isaac also runs into a man named Nolan Stross, who seems like he's on the verge of complete insanity and keeps telling Isaac about them being able to destroy the marker. Dana informs that he only destroyed a marker and that the Earth government had built one for study, and that's what's responsible for the current outbreak on the Titan station, the Sprawl. Isaac eventually reaches Dana, only to find out that she intended to use him to build markers, as he was unintentionally responsible for building the marker on the Sprawl. The Earth government doesn't want Isaac to live, as he is the sole survivor from the Ishimura and will destroy the marker. They find Dana and Isaac and kill Dana. Isaac barely escapes and contacts Stross, as his new mission is not just to escape the Sprawl, but to destroy the marker that he and Stross created with their minds. Along the way, you run into a woman named Ellie, who was left fighting for her life as her crew were converted into necromorphs. With some convincing and explaining of the situation, Ellie agrees to help Isaac and Stross destroy the marker before they all leave the station. This story has a more character-driven narrative with Isaac, and that is a fantastic move on Visceral's part. One of the things that Stross keeps mentioning are the steps to destroy the marker, a very clear parallel of the stages of grief. Isaac is in denial about Nicole's death. He becomes angry and regretful about recommending her to go visit the Ushimura, despite not knowing what her fate was to be. Him being depressed and wanting to just go and run away from the new marker and the current necromorph outbreak. Him struggling and trying to say that he did everything in his power to save her and finally accepting her fate. Moving on and finally letting go of his misplaced guilt for something that he had no control over. This approach to storytelling, in turn, has very similar plot points to Aliens with Ripley, waking up and realising that her daughter was dead and feeling guilty that she didn't see her grow up and live with her, despite her having no control over any of it, but then finds a new purpose when she finds a little girl named Newt and helps save her from the xenomorph hive. This all being said though, Aliens I think definitely executes it better than Dead Space 2, but I really do like that they followed a lot of the same beats here. I just wish we got to learn a little bit more about the markers and how they turned and why they turned people into necromorphs. At least we get a little bit more of a look at the religion around the conversion from human to necromorph through unitology, which is a very obvious parody of Scientology. The first Dead Space game had the events take place after an outbreak, and Dead Space 2 has the events that take place right as an outbreak starts. I do really like this, but again, there's not really much of a build-up to fighting the necromorphs. I do like that you're thrown right into the action immediately, but a build-up would have been a bit nicer in my opinion. We don't learn too much about the new cast either, but I think they're a lot more memorable here than what they were in the first game. Ellie is quite the badass and goes through a bit of a small and nice character arc, and Stross represents what Isaac could become if he isn't careful. The villain Tideman isn't really that memorable, but I love how the main focus is on Isaac's inner struggles. The story here in terms of its writing for the characters is much stronger than what it was in the original game, and I think it really benefits from it. It leaves a few questions unanswered, but for what it's worth, everything in terms of storytelling has greatly improved in my eyes, and making Isaac speak was just such a wise decision. Dead Space's gameplay has been refined and built upon very nicely for the sequel. In the first game, the controls felt a bit heavy when moving around or even stomping. Here, Isaac still has weight to him, but the movement is much more responsive and natural. The stomping is more accurate, and when Isaac runs around from left to right, he leans a bit more, allowing the player to strafe around enemies like a boxer would. In context of the story, it makes a hell of a lot more sense, as he's not just an engineer, he's also an absolute weapon now. In-game tutorials are still here, but feel a lot more useful rather than just randomly popping up on the screen and seeming situational. A prime example of this would be when you get stasis for the first time. You have to use it on an enemy, and if you fail, you die. Also on doors, which give players the incentive of using them and moving obstacles and other doors that are deadly to hit when moving too fast. Upgrades for your weapons and your rig make a return, though you do have a lot more options here. You still pick up schematics for items to use at stores, but for different suits that have various advantages, such as carrying more items in your inventory or a discount for all the items at a store when wearing a specific suit. Some weapons have their alt fires reworked as well, such as the pulse rifle now launches grenades, a much better option. There's a few new weapons here like the javelin gun, which can electrify targets with its alt fire. The anti-gravity sections have completely changed too. Rather than just going from point to point by jump boosting to a surface, your suit can boost and move around freely. This is much better. What's nice is they capitalise more in this game that Isaac is an engineer more than they did in the last game. You also have areas to hack, which shows a little minigame. You only have a few seconds to complete it. Make a successful hack, you have to get 3 blue sections in a row. If you fail, you'll be shocked and have to repeat the process. There's also a few new enemy types, and my favourite new enemy would have to be the Stalker. They lurk behind corners and can rush you at very high speeds, knocking you down if you don't hit them in the right spot in time. You have a few mini-bosses to fight too, but unfortunately some of them are very automated and the game almost feels like it's playing itself sometimes. It looks very cool and cinematic, but for the most part I'd just rather play it. There's also a number of QuickTime events that were very rampant in the 7th generation of video games, but it doesn't always happen so it's not too annoying, unless a necromorph grabs you, which can get very annoying. Another feature that I really love is being able to shoot glass windows open to suck out enemies, but you have to shoot the blast control in time, otherwise you'll get sucked outside the station or trapped in the door and die. I think Visceral did a great job in spiking the difficulty in this game. I personally find it a hell of a lot harder than the first game, and the game's highest difficulty here is hardcore and it's just a brutal challenge. I attempted this once, and I've played this game many times over, so trust me when I say that this difficulty is only for veterans of the game. No checkpoints, and you only get 3 saves the entire run. If you are successful, you unlock a hand cannon that is just Isaac saying pew and bang, that's a one-shot kill. I really like the parts where you have to fly at high speeds to reach a location in time and avoiding obstacles. Not too on rails, and it can be quite spectacular to look at. Now the final boss takes place within a battle of the mind of the marker or something. That's trying to get Isaac to be made with... well, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Interesting prospect, but not as cool as the hive mind from the first game. Now, it wasn't built up as well as the hive mind. The hive mind was still very far-fetched in context, but in the scale, the fight was actually really good. I really love that now instead of a hub area, you just go through each section of the station and it's all chapter-based. The whole thing feels a lot more like a journey, and there's little to no backtracking as opposed to the first game. There's also an online multiplayer mode that came with the game, and I can't really say much as I only played once or twice, and the servers are long dead. At the end of the day, in my most humble opinion, just about everything in Dead Space was done better in the sequel. And if you prefer the original, that's okay, because Dead Space 1 is still a great game. I just happen to prefer the sequel. Dead Space 2 looks absolutely magnificent, and it honestly has to be one of the best looking games of the 7th generation in terms of its graphical quality. The Isaac Clarke character model looks sensational, as it rightfully should. Ellie looks very badass, and Stross is very jumpy. There's not much here that I can really say about the graphics, other than everything in this game looks better than the first game, and that in itself is a huge compliment. The art style has changed a bit to better suit the game, with some of the new approaches they took with the game and story though as well. The suits here don't look as heavily armoured and have a more appropriate design for the tasks in the game. Some people were a little bit mixed on it, but in context of the story it just makes sense. Why would Isaac use a bulky and heavy suit when he can use something that's lighter and sleeker? If he has access to space military weapons and suits, it makes sense in context for the game and the development of his character. They do give you an option to use the classic engineering suit used in the first game. The look of the engineering suit is slightly different, but I'm glad that the tribute is still there as it is a classic. The Sprawl being an overly large space station has a handful of different locations and environments, therefore more creativity and diversity are appropriately used for the game. Environments that you traverse include a daycare, industrial machinery, medical facilities, and even satellite areas outside the station. I also really like that the deeper you traverse into the Church of Unitology, the more fucked up shit you see. The necromorphs all look great too, but I find it really unsettling and very disturbing to see necromorphs that reanimate children and even babies. As a matter of fact, there's even a part where you see a person hug a necromorph baby and it blows up in her arms. Like, what the fuck? Also, the necromorph children scream like kids too. This is fucked up. But I appreciate that Visceral had some balls. The sound design and mixing are much better here too. In the first game, dialogue, sound effects and music could all overlay and sound very clustered at times, but I didn't find that as much here. The soundtrack is also pretty good too, though I do miss the rendition of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star that you find in the first game's trailer. Speaking of trailers, what was up with the "your mum's going to hate this game" trailer?
I think it'll make a person become insane.
This game is an atrocity.
It's revolting. It's violent. It's everything you love in a game. And your mom's gonna hate it.
Why would they even make something like this?
Dead Space 2.
What the fuck did I just watch? The heads-up display essentially remains the same, but with a few graphical tweaks, such as the health bar along Isaac's spine looking a bit better, and you now have a locator instead of a map. For some reason, the default for aiming in this game is the reticle icon in the center of the screen. You can change it back to classic, which is good, but I think it's an odd choice to say that it's the default option. The locator can now switch between the objective, a nearby save point, store, or bench. It's hard to say if I find Dead Space 2 to be the scarier game, but I think that it's just a little bit more unsettling than the first. The whole thing with Nicole's voices and messages being played throughout the game is a little nice callback to the first game, but it's really distorted and most of the time I don't even know what the fuck this bitch is saying. The voice acting here is superb too. Gunnar Wright just nails the role of Isaac Clarke, and is the exact voice that I would picture his character to have. I just think that the most impressive thing was for this game, he actually had to develop a voice for the character, and he absolutely nailed it. I also loved a lot of the scenery that can be viewed when in certain areas of the sprawl, like looking at Saturn from a window or seeing the entire space station when boosting back to the main area. I especially love the parts where you go into space and everything is muffled. The gore in this game is superb too. The blood in some places has aged a bit, but there is something just so satisfying about stomping and dismembering limbs off necromorphs, probably due to the snapping and crushing sound effects. The deaths, of course, are incredibly gruesome, and probably the most iconic one of the series is in this game. It's that fucking needle that gets jammed inside Isaac's eye. This shit got me really tense when I first played it, and I fucked it up, believe me. The presentation in this game, like the first, exceeds all expectations and delivers something that has really stood the test of time. Dead Space 2 is a magnificent follow-up to the original game and is a great game in its own right. The story feels a lot deeper with its themes and character development of Isaac. The gameplay has gone through some changes, but I feel like they were necessary and belong. And the presentation is phenomenal and is one of the best 7th generation games I've ever played. It can be very hard for game sequels to improve on just about everything that its predecessor did. There are a few ones out there such as Halo 2, Batman Arkham City, and Portal 2. I consider Dead Space to be among some of the greatest sequels that are out there. Like the Alien films, Dead Space 1 was great, Dead Space 2 was also great, and the third one, well, it was a bit disappointing when up against the first two installments. However, that's a tale for another time. If you haven't played Dead Space 1 or 2, I highly recommend both titles, as they're some of the greatest survival horror games I've ever played, and they're not games to be missed out on.